There are moments in life when a person suddenly asks, "Who am I?" Not the name given by others, not the role I play in society, but something deeper, the question of being itself. This question has followed humanity since the dawn of consciousness. For Allama Iqbal, it is the most sacred of all questions. He calls it the search for Khudi, the secret of the self, the awareness of one's divine origin and creative power. Iqbal believed that within every human being lies an infinite potential, a spark of the same creative energy that formed the universe. But this spark sleeps beneath layers of imitation, fear, and dependency. Modern life, he said, has silenced the inner voice. We live surrounded by noise yet have forgotten the sound of our own soul. To rediscover Khudi is to awaken that sleeping power, to see ourselves not as dust but as light. The word Khudi in Persian literally means self or thiness. Yet for Iqbal, it is far more than ego. It is not arrogance, pride, or selfish individualism. Khudi is the creative center of man, the divine trust given to humanity, through which one becomes a conscious participant in creation. To strengthen Khudi is not to dominate others but to rise above weakness and fear. To lose it is to fall into imitation, dependency, and spiritual death. This, Iqbal says, is the tragedy of modern man. He has conquered the world outside but remains a stranger to the world within. He has reached the moon yet has not reached himself. The purpose of Asrar-e Khudi, the secrets of the self, is to guide the seeker back to that inner kingdom. Iqbal begins with a vision of the universe not as a fixed machine but as a living, growing reality. Everything is in motion, everything is becoming. And within this endless movement, the human being stands as the highest form of life, because only man is aware of himself. This awareness, this self-consciousness, is the birth of Khudi. According to Iqbal, the universe is the expression of God's will to be known. Each creature reflects a fragment of that will, but only man has been entrusted with freedom, the ability to choose, to act, to create. Freedom is the proof that man is not a mere product of nature, he is a co-worker with the divine. This freedom, however, is both a gift and a burden. It demands that man create his own path, define his own worth, and shape his destiny through action. Iqbal often describes Khudi as a flame. When it first appears, it is weak, a small, trembling light within the heart. It must be protected, fed, and strengthened through effort. Just as a seed becomes a tree by pushing through the soil, the self grows by struggling against resistance. Without resistance, there is no growth, without effort, no individuality. He rejects the idea that spiritual life means escape from the world. For him, the world is the field where Khudi proves itself. To live is to test one's will, to confront challenges, and to turn them into opportunities for self-affirmation. The universe is not a prison but a training ground for the soul. Each obstacle is a teacher, each hardship, a test of the self's strength. When the self learns to say "I am" with conviction, not in vanity but in awareness, it begins to reflect the light of its creator. For Iqbal, the true believer is not one who renounces life but one who embraces it fully, transforming every act into a sign of God's presence. Thus, to discover Khudi is to rediscover the sacred meaning of being alive. How does one awaken the sleeping self? Iqbal answers, through self-knowledge and self-discipline. The first step is to realize that you exist, not as an object among objects, but as a living center of will and consciousness. When a person becomes aware of his own inner voice, he steps out of the crowd of imitation and begins to live authentically. But awareness alone is not enough. The self must act, for action is the language of being. Iqbal says that knowledge without action is like a bird without wings, it cannot rise. The purpose of knowing oneself is to awaken the power to choose and to create. Every choice, even a small one, shapes the destiny of the self. Through decisions, through effort, through struggle, the self becomes real. Iqbal distinguishes between two kinds of life, borrowed life and original life. Borrowed life depends on others, on traditions, on authority, on passive acceptance. Original life springs from within, it is guided by the inner law of the self, not by the pressure of society. The first type of life is safe but shallow, the second is dangerous but divine. Only those who dare to live by their inner truth can grow into full selfhood. He teaches that Khudi grows through 3 stages. The first is obedience, discipline that gives form to the raw energy of the self. The second is self-control, mastery over desires and impulses. And the third is creativity, when the disciplined self begins to act as a source of goodness and beauty in the world. This final stage, Iqbal says, is the reflection of divine creativity within man. To awaken Khudi is therefore a moral and spiritual task. It requires courage to question habits, to face fears, and to endure loneliness. But the reward is immense, the discovery of an inner power that no external force can destroy. A person who knows his Khudi stands free even among chains, his dignity cannot be taken away because it comes from within. In this sense, Iqbal transforms spirituality from escape into empowerment. He does not tell man to withdraw from the world but to stand in it like a flame that cannot be extinguished. True faith, he says, is not a surrender of will but its purification and redirection toward divine purpose. To know God, one must first awaken the self that he created as his mirror. Life, for Iqbal, is not meant to be easy. Ease, he warns, is the enemy of growth. A person who seeks only comfort becomes weak, passive, and dependent. The universe has been designed as a field of resistance, so that the self may grow stronger through effort. Just as a river finds its voice by meeting stones, the self discovers its power by confronting challenges. Iqbal often compares life to a battlefield, not of violence, but of moral and spiritual testing. Every obstacle is a mirror showing us the strength or weakness of our own will. To complain about difficulties, he says, is to misunderstand the purpose of existence. Struggle is not a curse, it is the law of development written into the fabric of the universe. In Asra'i Khudi, he writes that the self grows only through resistance. When life resists, it is not rejecting you, it is inviting you to become more than you were yesterday. A life without resistance would be as meaningless as a game without challenge. Through conflict, the self gains form, like a sword being forged in fire. Therefore, do not pray for an easy life, pray for the strength to meet life's tests. Each moment of struggle can become a step toward self-realization if it is faced with faith, courage, and endurance. The self that avoids struggle remains a shadow of what it could be. The self that faces it becomes radiant, like polished steel. At the heart of Iqbal's philosophy stands the will, the power to choose, to act, to affirm one's existence. The will is the foundation of individuality. Without it, man is merely a collection of habits and influences. With it, he becomes a creator, capable of shaping not only his own destiny but also the destiny of others. Iqbal defines will as the energy that flows from self-awareness. The more clearly a person knows who he is and what he stands for, the stronger his will becomes. But the will must be directed, not by selfish desires, but by a higher vision of life. Otherwise, it. He draws inspiration from the Quranic verse, and God breathed into man of his own spirit. This means that man has within him a spark of divine initiative, the ability to say, I will, in harmony with the creative will of God. When a person aligns his will with this divine rhythm, his actions gain an extraordinary power. He becomes a source of change, a mover of history, a servant of truth. Iqbal admired individuals who lived with intense willpower, those who refused to surrender to despair or fatalism. For him, weakness of will is the beginning of death. The one who says, I cannot, dies before he has lived. But the one who says, I can, even in darkness, awakens the creative forces of the universe. The strong will is not stubbornness, it is moral clarity. It does not mean crushing others but mastering oneself. It is the quiet strength of the person who stands firm on principle, even when the world stands against him. This is the kind of will that builds civilizations and sustains faith through centuries. Iqbal's teaching on courage goes beyond the ordinary idea of bravery. True courage, he says, is not merely facing physical danger, it is the strength to remain true to oneself in a world of imitation. It is the power to say no when the crowd says yes. Modern man, Iqbal observed, has lost this courage. He has become afraid of solitude, afraid of difference, afraid of standing alone. He seeks security in the approval of others, but in doing so, he loses his soul. The courageous person is the one who dares to be himself, who listens to his own conscience even when it isolates him. Iqbal calls this the courage of the self. It is born from faith in one's divine origin. If you believe that God created you with a purpose, then you cannot live as a copy of others. You must live as an original, as a unique reflection of divine creativity. This courage is not arrogance, it is responsibility. It demands that you think, choose, and act with integrity. It requires the strength to accept mistakes and to rise again. For Iqbal, every fall is a lesson, not a defeat. The self that learns from failure becomes indestructible. He reminds us that even prophets and great leaders were not spared struggle or rejection. Their greatness lay in their endurance, not in comfort. So long as a person keeps moving forward, his Khudi continues to grow. It is only stagnation, not failure, that kills the spirit. If will gives the self-direction, love gives it life. Iqbal calls love, ishq, the fire of the soul, the creative passion that turns knowledge into action and faith into certainty. Without love, the self is dry and mechanical. With love, it becomes luminous. But what kind of love does he mean? Not sentimental emotion, not attachment or desire. He speaks of a love that flows from the realization of divine beauty. It is love that transforms fear into courage, pain into purpose, and solitude into joy. It is the energy that moves prophets to reform the world and poets to awaken hearts. Iqbal believed that love is superior to reason. Reason can analyze life, but love can create life. Reason divides, love unites. Reason hesitates, love acts. Reason is light, but love is the fire that gives that light meaning. The ideal person, he says, is one whose intellect is guided by love, whose wisdom is warm, not cold. This love is not passive adoration but active devotion. It is the will to serve, to uplift, to beautify. When love enters the heart, it transforms willpower into creative power. It frees the self from fear, because love finds joy in sacrifice. To live with love, Iqbal says, is to live in harmony with the rhythm of the universe. The stars, the rivers, the winds, all move in obedience to love. Through love, the self transcends selfishness and becomes a source of life for others. It does not lose itself, rather, it expands. The flame that lights another candle does not diminish, it multiplies. This is the paradox of divine love: the more you give, the more you become. For Iqbal, love is the essence of Khudi. Without it, the self remains incomplete. Love is the secret bridge between man and God, the invisible thread that connects the finite with the infinite. In Iqbal's view, the purpose of developing Khudi is not personal glory but creative participation in the universe. The highest stage of the self is not isolation but creation, to add something new to the world, to make existence richer, more beautiful, more conscious. The mature self, Iqbal says, is like a star that shines with its own light. It does not borrow its brightness from others. It does not imitate, because imitation is death. The creative person stands rooted in faith, guided by love, driven by will. He does not seek power over others but mastery over himself. From that mastery flows compassion, wisdom, and service. Iqbal's hero, the perfect man, is not a saint lost in meditation, nor a tyrant seeking control. He is a balanced being who combines contemplation with action, love with strength, humility with dignity. He turns faith into energy, and energy into creation. Such a person becomes, in Iqbal's words, God's co-worker upon earth. When the self reaches this stage, it will align with divine will. The boundary between I want and God wills begins to dissolve. Life becomes an act of worship, not through rituals alone, but through every moment of conscious existence. Every deed becomes sacred because it expresses the truth of being alive. To understand the strength of Khudi, one must also understand its opposite, the weakness of the self. Iqbal laments that many people live in a state of spiritual poverty. They exist, but they do not live. Their minds are filled with borrowed thoughts, their hearts depend on others for meaning. They have lost the power to say I. Weak Khudi results in dependence, political, economic, intellectual, and emotional. It leads to imitation of foreign ideals, blind conformity, and inner emptiness. A nation of weak selves, Iqbal warns, becomes easy prey for domination because it no longer believes in its own worth. He saw this weakness not only in individuals but in entire societies that had forgotten their creative spirit. They repeated the words of faith but had lost its fire. They admired heroes of the past but could no longer produce new ones. For Iqbal, this is the tragedy of decline, when people stop believing in their power to shape the future. The cure, he insists, is the revival of selfhood, first in the individual, then in the community. A single awakened person, he believed, can ignite the hearts of thousands. History itself changes when one soul dares to believe that life is sacred and full of purpose. Iqbal teaches that the self grows according to a moral law, what he calls the law of tension and ascent. The more a person strives for higher ideals, the stronger his Khudi becomes. The more he gives in to laziness, dependence, and fear, the weaker it grows. The self, like a muscle, develops through use and effort. This law explains why comfort and luxury often destroy character. When life becomes too easy, the will loses its sharpness, the spirit falls asleep. But when life is difficult and the self faces its trials with courage, it evolves. Suffering, therefore, is not always an enemy. It can be the fire that tempers the steel of the soul. Iqbal's vision of destiny is not fatalistic. He does not believe that man is a helpless product of fate. Destiny, in his philosophy, is something we build through our choices. Each act, each thought, each moment of courage contributes to the shaping of our eternal being. Thus, man is not a shadow cast by the past but a creator of the future. He often says, man is the trustee of God's freedom. To live according to this trust is the meaning of worship, to live consciously, purposefully, and with creative joy. When the self reaches full maturity, it becomes aware of its immortality. It realizes that death is not the end but a transformation, a passage to a higher plane of existence. The self that has developed through faith, will, and love cannot perish, because it has become aligned with the eternal. This is Iqbal's deepest insight: to strengthen the self is to prepare for eternity. In the life of such a person, time loses its terror. He lives each day not as a repetition but as a revelation. He is at peace, not because life is easy, but because he knows who he is. He no longer fears loss, for he has discovered the inexhaustible source of strength within himself. He lives in harmony with the divine rhythm, acting without anxiety, loving without fear, giving without regret. This is the destiny of Khudi, to transform man from a passive creature into an active participant in divine creation. The awakened self becomes a reflection of divine attributes: mercy, justice, creativity, and wisdom. In such a person, God's will is no longer distant, it lives and breathes through human action. What does all this mean for us today, in an age of noise, distraction, and uncertainty? It means that Iqbal's message is not just poetry, it is a call to awaken. We live in a time when machines are powerful but hearts are weak, when information grows but wisdom fades. The modern human being, connected to everything yet rooted in nothing, has never needed Khudi more than now. To rediscover Khudi today is to reclaim our inner independence, to live with purpose rather than impulse, to think with courage rather than conformity. It means believing that one's life, no matter how small it may seem, carries infinite value and responsibility. Each act of honesty, creativity, and compassion strengthens the light of the self. Each moment of truth contributes to the moral fabric of humanity. Iqbal's message challenges us to look beyond labels, beyond race, religion, and nationality, to the universal dignity of the human spirit. The secret of the self is not a privilege of one group, it is the birthright of every soul. Whoever awakens to his inner reality becomes, in Iqbal's words, a universe within a universe. In the closing lines of Allama Iqbal, Iqbal's voice becomes almost prophetic. He speaks not as a philosopher but as a friend of the human soul. He reminds us that the highest form of life is not achieved by withdrawing from the world but by transforming it. The purpose of knowing the self is to serve the world with greater love and strength. He says, "Raise thyself to such heights that before destiny takes effect, God Himself will ask thee what thou desirest." This verse captures the essence of his teaching, that the self, when awakened, becomes so noble, so aligned with truth, that even destiny bends before its will. This is not pride, it is partnership, the harmony between the human and the divine. When man discovers his Khudi, he rediscovers God, not as a distant ruler, but as the living presence within his heart. To know oneself is to know God. To love oneself rightly is to love His creation. This is the divine secret within you, the secret that can change not only your life but the destiny of the world. And so, as this first journey into Iqbal's vision comes to a close, let us remember. The question, "Who am I?" is not a mystery to be solved once, it is a path to be walked daily. Each moment offers a chance to live more consciously, to act more courageously, to love more deeply. The secret of the self is not hidden in distant heavens, it is written within the beating of your own heart. You are not a shadow of the world, you are its light. Awaken your Khudi, and you will find that the universe itself moves with you.